Hello, friends. Can you believe it? I know I cannot. Today marks the 1 year anniversary of Don't Waste the Chaos. This podcast started as a tiny spark of an idea, and here we are, 1 year and 52 episodes plus an intro later. So, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for being a part of this journey. Whether you're a longtime listener or this is your very first episode, I am so grateful you are here. I was looking at my Spotify Wrapped a couple of weeks ago and I saw that we are the #1 podcast for almost 30 people. We are in the top 10 podcasts for almost 70 of you. And so I am just super grateful and honored, and I would love to hear from you about ways that we can improve or things you'd like for us to address or people that you think we should interview, or maybe that's you. And so anyway, just super, super grateful. This has been a journey and I am nowhere close to stopping. I am loving it. So today I want to take you behind the scenes of this incredible year. I'm going to share why I started this podcast, what I've learned, and why you should consider starting your own podcast in 2025. So if you've ever had that little voice saying, maybe I should try this, or I think I'd be good at that, or I'd like to give it a shot, stick around. This episode is for you, and also stick around if you just want some of the tea. So let's rewind to January of 2023. I was already deep into running Salt and Light Advisors, which is my HR and people operations consulting firm, and my life felt full, almost too full, but there was this nagging feeling that I wanted to reach more people, to share the lessons I've learned in over 20 years of HR, and to connect on a deeper level. And in reality, I am serving my clients and I've served a handful of organizations over the last 20 years, but I feel like I've got a ton to share. And there's a decent amount of people who will shoot me a text and be like, hey, I've got an employee issue. Can I ask you about this? Or what are your thoughts on this? But I also know I've got other people who are like, I'm not going to bother her. I'm not going to, take up her time or whatever. And so I thought, like, why not start a podcast and just start sharing all of this information? Because 20 years in human resources, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. And, if you're a business owner or a leader, you have too. You've got a story inside of you. So I've been inspired by other podcasters who seem to have this magical ability to just sit in your ears like a mentor or a friend or just someone cheering you on. But the idea of starting my own podcast made me feel a little bit rocky. Like, who would listen? Would I run out of things to say? What if I sounded awkward? So I did sound a little awkward at first, but here's what I've learned. Your message does not have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. So I hit record in my little home office. That's where I'm at. And my dogs are sometimes wagging their tails and hitting things in the background. And Don't Waste the Chaos was born. Now, from the very start, I also started with YouTube videos. And initially I was like, I'm only going to do audio. That makes it easier. I don't have to put on any mascara. I work from home. But I had somebody encourage me from the very beginning, and she was like, your videos are going to suck. And they're not even going to be that good to watch, but you should start doing videos. It will get better. You will learn. You'll grow a following. And, sometimes people do go back to my very first episodes. There's actually a couple at the very beginning that have been my largest episodes, like strategic planning for businesses of any size. There's a couple of them. But in general, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's where I was starting. And I think so many of us, especially in the age of social media, we get in this place where we're like only seeing people's highlight reels. And so, why not? Like, why not show the magic and the mess? I think a lot of people relate to that. So podcasting has been a game changer, not just for my business, but for my personal growth. And I just want to share a few of the lessons that the journey has taught me. Number one, consistency builds trust. So releasing episodes regularly, even when life felt chaotic, I had too much client work, things like that, that taught me the power of showing up. Your audience will show up for you if you show up for them. I, of course, did some research before I started my podcast, and I saw that you will get the most listens. More people will have access to your episodes if you show up every single week. And so, I've got friends who do biweekly. I've got friends who do monthly. I've got friends who do it like when they can and it makes sense and something sparks their mind or whatever. And I just thought from the very beginning, if I'm going to take the time to do this, if I'm going to pay for some things, invest some money and spend the time, I might as well do it at the highest level. So that way I've got the highest reach. So that consistency has built trust. I've watched our followers, our subscribers go up. Our interaction has gone up. Our views have gone up. It looks like I get served up more on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube because I show up. we add shorts, we've got the video, we've got the audio. And so that was worth it to me. Now, if you're like, all of that makes it sound insurmountable and I can't do it, like you can do anything that you make time for and you can just put it in your calendar. That's what I would say about that. The second big thing that I've learned is that vulnerability connects. Sharing my own struggles, my own victories has made this podcast real. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with authenticity. And I would say this year is one of my goals. Like you might notice if you watch me on Spotify video or on YouTube, you might watch my eyes move around and you're like, she's reading. I write really detailed outlines before I do an episode. That's just what I like to do. Part of it is because I'm in a highly regulated field, human resources, tons of laws. And if you own a business or you're a leader, you know that. And so part of the reason is because I want to make sure I'm like covering the gamut. But I also am like, if I show up here on camera, I do have the gift of gab. I am a good communicator. I don't want to get off on a tangent per se. I want to deliver the value that I told you I was going to deliver in the show notes, in the title. And so that's part of the reason why I do very detailed outlines, pretty much scripts for myself before an episode. It's not like I'm not the one preparing it. I am the one preparing it, but I do reference my notes throughout the episode. My goal in 2025 and 2026 is to get to bullets. And then I can just ad lib inside of the bullets. I actually do really well in that. The first year I was like, I'm writing scripts, period, point blank. Like that's what I think is important. Year two, I'm going to show up even more authentically and kind of go off script a little bit. And hopefully I've built enough trust with my audience that they even value my opinion. Third thing that I've learned is that you learn by doing. I'll be honest, I didn't know the first thing about any audio editing or podcast marketing when I started, but I've learned as I've went along. And the magic is you don't need to know everything. You just need to start. And you can also surround yourself by a team of people who can help you and in an affordable way. Okay, fourth big thing that I've learned is that my voice matters and so does yours. Podcasting isn't about having the biggest audience, it's about reaching the right audience. So if you've got a message on your heart, someone out there needs to hear about it. And it never ceases to amaze me when someone will tag me like in their Instagram stories of what they're listening to when they're on a walk or when they're driving or whatever, and it's my episode. It is so humbling. And I'm sure like if you're a small business owner, you know every sale counts. I'm not even selling anything here. I'm just providing free value. But anytime somebody's like, hey, this was helpful, or, oh, I got a reminder, because I'm a subscriber to Don't Waste the Chaos to listen to another episode, I am like touched right in the heart. And it's just a reminder that like what I'm doing matters and there are people that this is benefiting. And that literally is like so heartwarming to me and so affirming, and it keeps me going. So if you've ever considered starting your own podcast, let me hype you up a little bit with a few reasons why now is the perfect time. The first is this: you get a connection like none other. Podcasts create an intimacy that other platforms can't match. It's just you, your voice, sometimes your video, and your listener, and that builds a unique connection. The second is that it's easier than you think. You don't need fancy equipment or a perfect plan to get started. Some of my favorite episodes were recorded with just a simple microphone and a whole lot of heart, a whole lot of passion for the topic that I'm talking about. The third is that your story matters. So every voice adds something valuable to the world. Do not let imposter syndrome stop you. You have a perspective that no one else can offer because it's been your learned experiences. And the fourth is the ripple effect. So starting a podcast has allowed me to connect with incredible people, grow my business, inspire others. Imagine the impact your voice could have. I've also, every other episode, I like to have a guest. I interview someone else, and it's been so amazing for me to get to learn from other people. A lot of them are people that I really respect. I invite them on my podcast. I get that special time with them. I feel like I'm learning directly from them because I am. And then you all get to learn directly from them too. So it's really cool. So if you're ready to give podcasting a try, or you just want to know what the steps are, I've outlined 12 simple steps to get started. I know you're like, ooh, 12, but I like to bring the value. I like to be very practical. So this is your podcast startup checklist. The first thing I recommend you do is define your podcast purpose and your audience. Decide on your central theme or mission of your podcast. What's it going to be about? Who's your target audience? Draft your mission statement and keep your content focused. I've got pillars that I focus on. And so inside of those pillars are where my audience or my content sits. So I have got HR, I've got ops, and then I've got mental health, and I also throw in like some personal stuff. And personal stuff for me is like me being a mom, a wife, and that kind of thing. So those are my content pillars. So every single episode should fall within inside those content pillars. In 2025, my goal this year is to expand on some of those and to make sure I'm rotating them in more. But the crux of my podcast is on HR and operations because I want to help businesses thrive and leaders thrive and get resources that they maybe wouldn't already have access to, or they don't have anybody mentoring them. They get access to me as a mentor for free. So that's my podcast purpose. And that's the audience I'm looking out for. But I've done a few episodes like one of them with a licensed clinical social worker, and we've talked about shame and guilt as working parents or just as individuals. I've got another episode coming up with that same individual that is on stress and anxiety. Now, those are things that we deal with in the working world. Is that directly on HR and operations? I mean, personally, I would argue, yeah, because that impacts the way that you can show up at work. So I'm just making sure that they fall inside of my content pillars. The second is to choose your podcast format. Decide on your format, meaning solo episodes, interviews. Are you going to have a co-host, discussions, a mix? And for me, I want half solo episodes and half interviews. That's just what my layout is. That's what I've decided. That's what I enjoy. You don't have to do that. It takes a little extra like coordination to get other people on your pod. But for me, that's what I picked for my show. You also need to decide, when it comes to like episode length and frequency, are you doing weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? And then also I try to do my episodes somewhere between like 25 and 45 minutes. I've rarely had one fall under. I've had a few go over, but that's like in general my goal. The reason why that's my goal is because based off data, that's the sweet spot for listeners. And I can see in my data how many people listen to the very end, listen to half, or watch my videos to the very end, or just watch for the first couple of minutes. But you need to decide that at the beginning, and then you can of course flex. Okay, so we've decided our podcast purpose and audience. We've decided on our podcast formatting. The next is developing a content plan. I would brainstorm your episode ideas to start. The funny thing is, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, you did 52 episodes this year. Like, do you have any content left? I've got an unlimited amount of content after 20 years in HR, and I'm still running my consulting firm. So I've got new stuff coming to me all the time. I also read HR publications every single day. And I'm not exaggerating there. Like, I am very passionate about what it is that I do, and staying fresh and on top of the law is very important to me. So I've got content for years and years and years, in my opinion, but I would recommend you brainstorm like 10 to 15 episodes just to start. Like, what would I talk about? And also create an episode outline, or like I do, a script template to streamline your recording process. And if you're going to do interviews at this point during your content plan, identify a couple potential guests that you would like to invite to do interviews with you. Okay, next is investing in equipment and software. You can go bananas like this, or you can keep it really, really basic. So from the very beginning, and if you're watching me on video, I'm going to show, I use this blue Yeti mic. It's really affordable. I bought it on Amazon. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. But this has been the mic that I have used, and it's super simple. And I'll just show you. There's literally a mute and a volume on one side. And on the other side, we've got our gain setting and then our pattern setting. And there are a ton of podcasts out there, or a ton of blogs and stuff out there on what your settings should be. And Blue Yeti gives you information too. So it's not a guessing game. You don't have to know anything. I literally just pulled up a couple of things on Reddit, saw what I needed to do, set my settings, did an episode, was like, okay, I sounded like I was talking in a hallway, and that's weird. I'm in my office, so I've changed a few things over time, but that's all that I've used. Now, do you have to have this? No, there's a ton of people who do it on like earbuds with that mic. You can just do it into your computer. It's just maybe not going to be as clear and crisp. One of the reasons why I bought this mic, and again, it's not overly expensive, but one of the reasons why I bought it is because when I'm recording, I have a set time, but like my husband and I both work from home. So sometimes he's in and out, and I don't want you to be able to hear him like the door, or if he's in the kitchen making some food. And so this mic is picking up my voice. It's directly under me. And so that helps with that. And then also like if my dogs start like rolling around on their bed, which is in the living room outside this door, they're huge 80-pound labs. I don't want you to be able to pick them up. So that's one of the reasons why I did this mic. Okay, next thing is headphones. And I started out my podcast with no headphones, and you don't have to have headphones. The technology that I use, you can choose if you're using headphones or not. You choose what mic you're using. You choose what camera you're using. And so you don't have to have them. But I eventually ended up getting them for interview purposes so I could hear them really clearly in my ear. So I bought these Audio Technica. There's nothing magical about them, and they're not very expensive. They're padded, which is nice. I'm showing them on the video if you hear some funny sounds. And so I will also link these in the show notes. They were very affordable. You can go higher quality, you can go lower quality, you can use your AirPods or earbuds or nothing at all. After a while, I decided to go to that and I liked it. Okay, so when it comes to like pop filters or like sound boxes, mic stands, all of that kind of stuff, I don't use any of that. I've thought about it. Like my office is small and my floor is brick. And so I did throw a rug, not under my desk because I have a rolly chair, but I threw a rug on the other side of the room to help like diminish the echoing sound. When I have to close my door in here, it gets a little more echoey. So I could use some padding like on the walls and on the ceilings. This office is my home. And so I like the aesthetic and my sound's like pretty good. So I could make it better by doing some different things like that, but I haven't. And then mic stand. This is something that I am thinking about getting to where the mic will come in like it would come in like from the side like this for me. But I don't know, like, I don't even know if I need that. I see other people doing that and this has worked just fine for me. I just have it sitting under my desk. It might give me a little more freedom though to like move around if I had that stand. So I'm probably going to get one eventually. But again, I've done a whole year of podcast episodes without one of those. So you don't have to go buy it. Okay. When it comes to software for recording and editing and things like that, I went with Riverside FM from the very beginning. There's Audacity, GarageBand for Mac users. There's a ton out there. I would just say Google it or throw it into OpenAI or Claude or whatever you use just to see like what the hot thing is now. I've used Riverside FM. I would say it's not always perfect. Like there have been a few things that I've had to learn and they're working on things too. Like podcasting is exploding. And so, they've had to iron out some kinks because like they're growing a ton also. They've got a bunch of different plans. It's not very expensive for me. Like when it came to the mic, the headphones, and then my monthly subscription to Riverside FM, not super expensive, but things start to add up. Also, excuse me, when it comes to editing, you can use Adobe Audition, Descript. You can edit right inside of Riverside or whatever technology you have. I'll be candid. When I first started this, I had a person who was doing marketing for me. And I thought she was going to be my podcast editor. She was really tech savvy. She was young. And I was just like, this is going to be a perfect fit. Well, she bailed really close to the podcast. So I was prepping for the podcast a couple of months in advance. And I mean, literally like the beginning of January, she was like, I'm not going to be able to do this, which is totally fine. I just wish she could have told me a couple of months before, but she like kind of started digging in and seeing all of what she needed to know. And she was like, I'm in over my head. So another podcaster that I follow, I reached out to her, said, who are you using? And I reached out to that company. I meant to interview. I had 3 different companies I was going to reach out to. I meant to interview 3 different companies, but the very first one was a really great fit. And I'm going to link that company in the show notes. It's Amplify Boutique. If you decide to reach out to them, pretty please tell them that Kerri from Don't Waste the Chaos sent you. Or I can do a warm introduction if you want to reach out to me and I can shoot the owner an email to get you set up well. But they do the production part of it. So here's what I'm responsible for. I write the script. I do all of the prep part. I own the technology. I pay for my software subscriptions. But after I record, I submit a form to them that essentially is like, here's what I want the title for this podcast to be. Here's the day I want it to release. Here's any notes. Here's a picture of, the guest that was with me if I'm doing an interview. Here are my show notes. Here are any commercials I want you to run. And then here are any like cleanup notes. Like, for example, inside of this episode, I restarted one little portion. So I'm going to type in like, hey, at this time span, I need you to edit that out. So they then go clean up the episode for me. And so I have one fee for that. They clean up the episode and then they go and post it. So they pull it from Riverside FM. And then my hosting platform that I personally use is Kajabi. And I will link that in the show notes as well. I use Kajabi because I also have online courses and downloadable tools. And so Kajabi is really good for hosting coursework, like, live coursework or pre-recorded coursework, and then also for downloading templates. And so Kajabi made sense to me because they also can host podcasts. And so they pull it from Riverside, they do any edits they need to do, and then they drop it into Kajabi for me and schedule it. My podcast comes out on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. So they are making sure that it flows to all of those places. They go in and load it onto YouTube. They also load a cover photo for me and like intro, outro on YouTube because it's different than on the episodes. So they do a lot of that for me. I've got a package with them where it's essentially two different packages because I'm paying for the podcast editing and the uploading and hosting. And then I'm also paying for the YouTube piece because that's additional. So they've got a gamut of options, and most podcast editing companies do. They've done a great job. It is a couple, a man and a woman, and the woman originally started this because she was a podcaster, was doing really great, kept getting the questions. So she built a business and her husband does it with her. So anyway, that's what I'm using. Like those are the tools that I'm using. So I've got my Blue Yeti mic. I've got my Audio Technica headphones. I use Riverside FM for recording the episodes. And then for hosting, I use Kajabi. They go onto Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. That's the crux of it, right? Okay. So we have talked about defining your podcast purpose and audience. We've talked about choosing your podcast format, developing a content plan, investing in your equipment and software. Let's go into designing your podcast branding. So you're going to want to create a podcast name that's unique and reflects your theme. I chose Don't Waste the Chaos because years ago, I used to be a chief operating officer for a private insurance firm. We ended up selling majority share, and then I held dual appointment at that organization. And then also the organization that purchased us, I was the chief marketing officer for them. So I had a dual appointment. While I was at that organization, there were so many times where things would get hard. We were making a lot of changes. It was when I came on board, it was 120 years old. They brought me on board. I was the first female executive, first non-family member or friend. And so I was a true outsider, which good for them for making it happen because it truly transformed their business, transformed their EBITDA, transformed their future. I mean, pat on my back, I guess. They went along with it and were willing partners and worked really hard with me. But we made a lot of changes in my first 18 months, and it was freaking hard. And there were times when it would be so uncomfortable that no one wanted to move on. It would kind of be like, we just need to abort mission. Like, this is too hard. It's too disruptive for our team. And in one of our board meetings with the ownership team, I was like, don't waste the chaos. Like, it's already uncomfortable. Like, now's the time to keep pushing and make this change. Everyone's already like dysregulated. Let's just go ahead and make it happen so we can come out on the other side. Well, not too long after that, we were with essentially a sales organization that helped us with some efficiencies. And I said it to our rep at that organization, like, don't waste the chaos. Then she started repeating it in her organization. She would tell people like that she was working with other agency owners and executives. And she would be like, one of my girlfriends once said to me, like, don't waste the chaos. And so I saw how that took off, and I've used it in business. It's one of my taglines, and I've used it in business for years. And so it just seemed like it made sense for my YouTube channel because I've always been like, what do I use Don't Waste the Chaos for? Like, it's my thing. I say it to people all the time. And so I went and bought the website domain like a long time ago. And I even set up, like, if you happen to look back in Kajabi, I recorded an episode, like an intro episode, and picked that title a long time ago because I wanted it. I didn't want anyone else to have it. Like, I'm the girl who says that. I'm the boss that like owns that. And so that's where I got my podcast name. You might want to pick a name that's more practical. It helps people understand exactly what you're talking about. From a marketing perspective, I read that's like smarter. But I love the phrase, don't waste the chaos, especially in business, but it works for your personal life too. So that's how I came up with my podcast name. At that time, you also need to design cover art that meets the podcast platform specifications, and they lay that out. A lot of them are like 3000 by 3000 pixels, whether it's a JPEG or a PNG. So figuring out like the podcast platforms you're going to show up on, what the qualifications are, I literally went into Canva and created it myself. You can go into Canva. Oh, Canva is so good. And I know if you're like a true marketer, you mock Canva, but like it helps people look better. Okay. Like it just does. And so I just typed in like podcast cover options and manipulated a couple of them that I found. And boom, we literally right now, we still have the same podcast cover that I created personally myself when the podcast launched. And I've since hired like a legit marketing person. And I've thought like, I need to have her probably spruce that up or change that for me or revamp it. And we will over time, but I actually love it. It's a boss cover. Then you want to write a catchy description that outlines what listeners can expect. Why do they listen to you? Why would they show up? Why would they come back? So that's your branding. We talked a little bit about hosting and distribution, but again, you need to find those hosting platforms that work for you and then where you're going to distribute. So again, my hosting platform is Kajabi, but there's Buzzsprout, Libsyn, Podbean. There's all kinds of them where you can store your audio files and then figure out where you're going to distribute your podcast to platforms. Like I said, Apple and Spotify and YouTube are what I use. There's other ones. And if I look into my data, I can actually see that my podcast is being pushed out to other players. So other players have picked up my podcast, even though I'm not like directly linking with those. So I probably need to go on and like add those to direct links. And so that way people can find it more easily. Okay, next you need to test your technology. So do some testing to record, to familiarize yourself with your microphone, your software. I literally didn't test my mic until I recorded a whole episode. And then, like I said, it didn't sound the way I wanted it to sound. So I changed. Like I would do that differently next time around. But you know what? We were winging it. Same with checking your audio levels and learning like some basic editing techniques. Even if you hire a company like I did, I'm the one recording the episode. So I had to do a little research. And then when it comes to your internet connection, make sure that that's stable if you're recording remotely. We all are recording to the cloud usually. And so my internet connection, like only one time in 52 episodes has it pooped out, and that has sucked, but we rolled with it and we figured it out. Next thing you need to do is create an intro and an outro. So you would want to write and record a short, engaging introduction to your podcast. You heard mine at the very beginning. And a lot of times after just like a Netflix series that you get into, a lot of people, like when I'm listening to my favorite podcasters, I tap through. Like I know that one of my favorite podcasters, her intro is 2 minutes and you can tap through a 15-second interview. So I'm like tap, 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 tap until it hits the 2-minute mark. And then I listen to her. Like once you've listened to my intro once, like you don't need to listen to it again. I mean, that's not like hurting my feelings. I don't care. But you need to record an intro, especially for the people who are like first timers with you. They need to understand, like, is this something I want to stick around for? Also consider adding background music to enhance professionalism. Some people have music planned for their whole episode. That makes me bananas. Like my brain does not like to listen to your voice and have music playing in the background. That's really stressful to me. Maybe other people like that. That's not a good fit for me, but I do have music at the beginning of the episode and at the close of the episode. So you can check royalty-free music sources like Epidemic Sound or Free Music Archive. I could pull mine straight from Riverside, my platform that I use, but using some intro and outro music definitely makes it sound more professional. And then write a closing statement or call to action to wrap up your episodes. I obviously say some things at the close of my episode live. And then there's like my legal statement at the end. And I call it a legal statement because it's literally just a close. I'm asking you to review the episode, to subscribe if you don't already, to check out my YouTube channel and subscribe there, follow me. But I also say at the end, I'm not an attorney. Because I'm not. And sometimes I make recommendations that would make legal impacts. And so I say at the end of my episode, you know, like, hey, I'm not an attorney. Consult your attorney if you've got a sticky situation, blah, blah, blah. So that's the intro and outro. Next, plan your marketing strategy. So you want to build excitement before your launch, maybe with some teaser content on social media. I'd recommend you create a website. I have a website, it's don'twastethechaos.com. You're welcome to go take a look and see how that's set up. I'd also recommend you look at Jenna Kutcher's, Amy Porterfield's, Don Miller. There's some really good podcast websites out there that, you know, I took a look at and like helped inform my decisions, or even just a landing page like Kajabi, my hosting site. You can do a landing page on there. And that On your website, you'd put things like episode links, show notes, links to any of your sponsors, commercials, stuff like that. And then also engage your audience by encouraging reviews, shares, and feedback. If you're still with me right now, please do that for me. This is my 1 year, like a fabulous gift for me would be if you would write me a review or share it or follow it if you're not already. Oh, I would love it. Okay, next, record and edit your first episode. So find a quiet space to record to minimize background noise, stick to your outline or script, but allow room for that natural flow. And then after that, you either can use the AI in your tool or use, by the way, yes, in Riverside FM, you can literally use AI to take out like blank spaces, pregnant pauses, or other things like that. They will even go in and recognize filler words, background noise, and errors. AI will now, or you can pay a company to do that. But literally just record and do some edits, and then put that episode out there. Launch your podcast. That's the 11th step. Launch it. Upload your first 3 to 5 episodes to give your listeners a range of content. So when you go live, I had 3 episodes plus an intro. And the reason for that is there's a lot of people who binge podcasts at once. So if someone comes to your podcast and your intro is 12 minutes long, I don't mean your episode intro. I mean like your very first, like, I'm doing a podcast. Welcome to it. This is my very first episode. It's not like the meat and potatoes. This is like explaining how I got here. If all you do is give them that, then I don't know. They don't know what your episodes look like. What's going to keep them coming back unless they're a friend or family? And spoiler alert, my friends and family don't listen to this with regularly. A few of them do. Like, thank you so much to one of my nieces who I know listens regularly, and a couple of my friends, but most of them, they don't listen. Like, this podcast is reaching people who are in professional situations who like are learning from me. I do have a few friends out there, like shout out to Jeremy and a few different people who are listening, my husband. But in general, like this is going out to a lot of strangers. And so you have to give them a reason to come back. So if you go ahead and record those 3 to 5, if I'm driving from where I live to St. Louis, I've got an hour and a half. I can listen to 3 episodes, and I usually do. I get coached by Dan Martell. I listen to 3 of his coaching calls while I'm on the road, back to back to back. And I feel like super accomplished by doing that. So 3 to 5 is the sweet spot to launch. Announce your launch on all your marketing channels. Like if you've got an email newsletter, and if you don't, go ahead and start one, because when it comes to social media, which you should also promote on social media and to your personal networks, but email, you kind of own that space. That's your list. Social media, like it could go down. You can get your page shut down. It can have an outage, whatever, and then you can't reach your audience. And so you need to have an email marketing list to be able to announce what's going on with you. And then celebrate your launch day and interact with early listeners. I did a promotion. I gave away some Magic Minds, and I also gave away Magic Minds, a drink that I drink. And I also gave away an Amazon gift card, just thanking people for writing reviews and listening. Okay, 12th step, you want to track and improve. All of these platforms have analytics. You want to monitor your listener analytics to understand what's resonating, solicit feedback from your audience, adapt your content strategy accordingly, and then stay consistent and keep experimenting to improve over time. I love hopping on my YouTube channel. Like when I'm writing my weekly email marketing, I automatically go in and like drag the last episode that I recorded for Don't Waste the Chaos onto my Salt and Light Advisors weekly email. And when I do that, it opens up YouTube, and I just briefly take a look through the analytics, and I'm always like, oh, that feels so good. Like I love seeing how it grows. And then weekly, my marketing coordinator Paige puts all of the data together, and we review it together for my business, for my podcast, and all of that. So with this checklist, you've got a roadmap already to get your podcast up off the ground and into the ears of your audience. So as I celebrate this 1-year milestone, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude to everyone who's tuned in, shared an episode, sent me a message, written a review about how the podcast has impacted you. Seriously, a genuine thank you so much. You have made this journey so worthwhile, and you keep me excited to keep going. So if this podcast episode has inspired you to start your own podcast, let me know. I'd love to cheer you on and help you get started. Remember, your voice matters, and the world needs to hear what only you can offer. So that's it for today, friends. Thanks for celebrating this milestone with me, this anniversary of the pod. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you would share it with someone who might be inspired to start their own podcast. Don't forget to leave me a review. It helps this little podcast grow. Until next time, keep showing up, keep sharing your story, and don't waste the chaos.